and thanks for being here. I think today is one of our most expected curator connections. We have Deborah Klochko, and we all want to know about our photography collection. We want to know the story of MOPA. We're eager to know how this collection was assembled. So I think I'm just going to stop, taking time and let the star talk. So thank you very much, Deborah, for being here. Thank you all for waking up earlier, but I think it's going to be super worthy. Thank you very much, Deborah.
Thank you, Deidre. And also, thank you for being here and joining us in the Joan and Irwin Jacobs Theater. I think this is really one of the gems in Southern California. It's an amazing space, and I could spend hours just looking up at the stars. But thank you for being here. And I'm thrilled that you want to learn about the collection because it's such an important part of the Museum of Photographic Arts. And one of the things that's important to understand, so I've got to multitask here, 1 minute. There we go. Everyone is familiar with the phrase, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So what does a collection of over 10,629 photographs representing the work of over 850 photographers tell us? The Museum of Photographic Arts collection covers the entire span of photography and more, from the prehistory to contemporary work. And among the first gifts to the collection are the works of important artists such as Manuel Alvarez Bravo, Robert Duanau, Andre Cortege, and Danny Lyon. MOPA believes that sharing the work and the stories that each provide is a vital part of the nature of collecting. By seeing the art and not just storing it, even though we do it as correctly as possible, as you can see from the slides behind me, but learning about the maker along with their influences and motivations, a deeper understanding will be experienced. It was Aristotle who wrote, "Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all." At the heart of MOPA is the concept of making learning visual and sharing the power of photography in all of its facets. One of the things that we did very early on was to include the library in the definition of our collections, our holdings. So, how and why does a museum create a collection? Well, it didn't start off as a museum, and this is the library. But what's important to know is even though this is the 40th anniversary of the Museum of Photographic Arts, it really was the Center of Photographic Arts incorporated in 1974. In a letter dated 20th of June, 1974, the then director, Lawrence Yeruda, wrote to members, "Although we have not yet located the correct site for a permanent home, we are continuing efforts to find a central location with suitable space and a moderate rental." Aren't we all? I added that last bit. In the meantime, the center has decided to make use of existing exhibition spaces. Local colleges, universities, and galleries have shown an enthusiastic desire to cooperate. And so what you see for 10 years until the founding of the Museum of Photographic Arts is that they did exactly that. They had exhibitions in various locations, and you can see some invitations from a few of those. And I want to share with you, there were 19 trustees as part of the founding of that Center for Photographic Arts. And it was truly a museum without walls. They had exhibitions of Dorothea Lange at Palomar College, Elliott Erwitt at the Jewish Community Center, Eugene Atget, Southwestern College Art Gallery, an exhibition called 10 by 10 at Grossmont College, and one that I thought was incredibly impressive, considering that we're talking about the 70s, was the photographic portraits bringing together Diane Arbus and Richard Avedon. So, these are compelling, intelligent, exciting exhibitions. So, that letter that I was quoting from also mentions, there's a line where it says that through the generosity of donors, the permanent collection was growing. And I sort of paused when I read that because in all of the research that I've done, I don't have any listing of what those early gifts might be. So that's a task for somebody else to start going through the files, maybe interviewing a few of the people still around and digging that out. Because when I go into the records, it really starts in '84, the collection information. And so with its move into a permanent home in Balboa Park in 1983, the 10-year-old Center of Photographic Arts was renamed the Museum of Photographic Arts. And one of the stated objectives of this new museum was to, I quote, assemble an outstanding collection of film, video, and still photography, a repository of our cultural heritage, and a place that, and a plan was already in place to create an active museum, a participatory museum alive with programs. And collections would become a very important part of this new institution. And here you see the build out of the 8,000 square feet that we originally had here in Balboa Park. And this is many of you may know about the famous push pin party that we've recreated several times since. But before they put the final finishings on the exhibition space and finished the build out, people were invited to bring their own photographs in and pin them up to the drywall. And you can see that's exactly what people did. And also it opened the walls to the photographers in the region. The start of the collection, and then here we are more recently in probably 2008 and forward, a different kind of party and event in the space. And yes, that is a boa constrictor. So three of the images that you're seeing are from when we had our Pop Thursdays, and we would have screenings along with cocktails, and this was for Blade Runner. So you have the acrobats, you have, if any of you have seen Blade Runner, the snake is very important in that. And then the final image is a more recent, the Sony World Photography Competition, and our the previous youth exhibition. The start of the collection was based on a combination of donations and images from both collectors and artists, along with targeted purchases. By the end of the first year, the collection included works by 36 photographers covering the 19th and 20th centuries. Among the original donors to the collection were Bruce Levy, Edward Ettis, Joseph Monson, Stanley Burns, Graham Nash, yes, a musician, was a big photo collector, and Carl Melcher, Stephen White, Timothy Eaton, Thomas Meyer, and Constance Llewellyn. And some of these names are well known as collectors, so that's why I really wanted to take a moment and share with you their names. Today, along with the photographic images and collections, our collection includes the library of 22,000 plus books and related materials highlighting photographic processes, art objects, and other artistic and historic materials relevant to the media. And it is a collection that continues to grow and was always intended to provide an encyclopedic view of photography. So what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of overview of exhibitions, not every single exhibition, but again, highlights, and also ones that almost always represent some addition to the collection. So with Ruud van Empel, Dutch photographer, our collector group went to Paris where we first met with him. We then went to Amsterdam on another trip where we met with him and planned his first museum exhibition here in the United States. And the result was Ruud van Empel's Strange Beauties. And what you're going to find is that in images such as the one of the little statue and the boy, those are now in our collection. And so this whole idea of being able to collect and show as part of the process is, I think, very important to keep a collection very alive and exciting. In 2013, we had our 30th anniversary exhibition, which included works from the 3 decades of giving. and it includes works such as the Korean American photographer Debbie Han, the Three Graces that you see, and the 19th century mugshot book. We have several of those, and which are, again, an important part of how we talk about the medium of photography. It also included works by Mike Light, who we have a number of works, Bruce Davidson, Loretta Lux. We also began a series of exhibitions called the California Invitational. We've done 3 of them, and the first one was a state of art, I believe it was the title. We didn't do a publication for that one. It was something we did every 3 years. And it was meant to send out an invitation to curators, directors, mostly in California, to give us the names to recommend photographers who, I guess the easiest way to say it, who were tax-paying in California. The work didn't have to be made in California, but and the work had to be within the last 5 years. And then out of that, the artists were selected and became part of these invitationals. So you have artists such as John Chiara, David Mizell, and Paul Schenk. We have a number of all 3 of those artists. We have works in our collection now. And also Siri, her work is, we don't have that in our collection, but the Eric William Carroll punctum, we have the version he made for San Diego. And these are images that he downloaded, punched a hole in the center, and the pole that you see in the center represents all of the images made in 1/60th of a second worldwide, and San Diego. So again, it really is very telling to get a sense of what's out there in the world. And again, this is now in our collection. And other artists such as Mona Kuhn, she has been in several of the invitationals. Mona Kuhn, yes. Boundless California Invitational was the most recent one, and again you can see the list of artists that were included in that. And off to the right-hand side, you see Kevin Cooley, and we do have one of those works in the collection. I'm showing you these as exhibitions because I think, again, as you saw from the earlier images, we have appropriate storage. We have temperature controlled. We have large storage for racks for the bigger works. But again, a collection needs to live and breathe. It needs to be shared. It needs to be seen, and that's part of what I'm trying to share with you today. As part of the 100th anniversary of Balboa Park event that we did, Parkwide, we did an exhibition called 7 Billion Others, and this was predominantly videos of people around the world, and they were all asked the same series of questions like, what do you dream of? What's important to you? What does family mean? And again, transforming the space to engage with this kind of conversation. And our monitor that's out front, which you can see yourself, made up of 974 faces, that was something we actually created for the original version of 7 Billion Others. But it was so popular, we have kept it. So those faces are made up of all of these people. Another Dutch artist, Hendrik Kirsten, model and muse, we also gave him his first museum exhibition in the United States, and we have a number of works. And what was so wonderful is we could talk about the fact that, number one, his daughter is his model and has been since she was 5 years old. And the work that we showed is all from his most recent body of work, where he poses her in the Flemish primitive painting style. And so here we had information and interactive that could take you into the history of that. We have originated other exhibitions, such as minor white, the time between the sequences of minor white, and we do have a few minor whites in the collection. But what was important about this exhibition is minor white's work had never been seen sequentially, and these were the sequences he established. So a lot of his individual works were well known, they're collected, but to see them in the series that he created was a whole new meaning. And this is someone who studied poetry and taught at the San Francisco Art Institute School and was very interested in not only sequencing images, but he felt that the space between images was as important as the image itself. So that kind of spacing and how you look at images was very much a part of what he wanted to do and what he wanted to get across. Genesis, Sebastian Salgado, it's more to show you that, again, we do works that represent all approaches. And Sebastian Salgado photographed the world in black and white. So Africa and Amazon, and then Beauty and the Beast, a very different kind of presentation, where we looked at the animal in photography. And I believe this was it was the anniversary of the zoo. So this was kind of our contribution to celebrating that. But as you can see from this image, the range, the international diversity of this work is really kind of exciting. And I want you to pay particular attention to the cats, because they're going to come up again and in a different context. And then the woman on the horse, Hendrik Kirsten, and that's his daughter Paula. And this is a very different style, but the connections that we make with these artists are equally important. Beauty and the Beast dealt with sections such as posing, and what we tried to do was really give people a sense of that kind of richness. And a number of those works came to the collection. So I know that SDMA is getting ready for next year's Pacific Rim, the Getty's Pacific Rim's Standard Time. I'm getting some combination of those. And it's going to be a fabulous exhibition that you're doing on Islamic art and science. Well, we were part of the last one, LA, Los Angeles, Latin America, and we did point, counterpoint, contemporary Mexican photography. This also is the debut of the approach that we began to develop for the collection, which was a Pacific Rim collecting focus, but very broadly defined, both sides of the Pacific. And it was partially because we already had some wonderful pieces in the collection. We had quite a few 19th century works from China, Japan, India. And also in really looking at where we're located, there was no reason to really try and just focus on Europe and be Eurocentric, but really cast our eye the other way, westward. And so of the point counterpoint, the artists in this exhibition, as you can see, we interviewed not only curators and writers about photography, but and also, as you've already noticed, everything is bilingual. We do have an endowment from the Gardner Family Fund, and that has been in existence since 2008. So it really was a group effort to kind of curate. We had curators at a team in Mexico as well as our team, and meeting back and forth to create the exhibition that we have. Of all of the artists in the show, 9 of them donated works to the collection. I mentioned Pacific Rim in India. We have a fabulous collection of 19th century travel views of India. And so in 2017, I did an exhibition called India and the Picturesque, which really looked at what this meant. And it was about the British, certainly other countries controlled India at that time, but eventually the British became the dominant, and they encouraged the military photographers to send photographers to basically make records of what they had control of. So the landscape, the architecture, the people. And so this exhibition talked a little bit about the processes that were being used, but also began to look at things. So I don't know how well you can see it here, but in the center is a very distinguished gentleman standing. He looks like a painting. Well, as the British left and the Indians took over, the native Indians took over the studios, and because they had been assistants before, they began creating works that were more in the style of Indian miniature painting, heavily painting over the surface of the image, getting rid of perspective. And so we acquired that piece that you see there, as well as there's a carte de visite of a typical studio portrait, but of a woman in sari, and then a group one that's painted out, and also a miniature painting. So again, all of this becomes very important in telling the story. So we will actively collect items that enhance, a particular exhibition if it's really deemed important. And then I mentioned we have albums, and looking at not only the framed images, but the albums were displayed as well. Pacific Rim continues. We acquired the Peter Farrell Australian Photography Collection. And that original collection included 24 images that were 19th century to very contemporary work. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but with that, we also acquired 100 books on Australian photography. And since then, Peter has continued to donate, and that collection now covers more than 200 images. But as part of that, the conversation with the donor was, let's take a look at what's going on now, contemporary. And so we did an exhibition that was invitational. We had 5 guest curators, all Australian, because it's a little presumptuous for me to go and think I know all of Australia and to try to pull an exhibition together. But we invited these 5 individuals from around the country to make a selection. And again, current work, and they actually came up with a list of like 30 names. Out of that, where 2 or more agreed, that became the final, I think it was 13 in that exhibition. I could be wrong on that number, but we wanted to make sure that they had voice. And of that, a quarter of them were of Aboriginal heritage, and about half were women. And not even deliberate, but it was great that was part of what we were able to achieve. Trent Park, and the large color pieces are Justine Varga? Yes, Justine Varga, thank you. And Justine, while she actually came to the opening, and while the opening was up, she won the most important prize in portraiture in Australia. And yes, those color pieces are portraiture to the DNA level. What she does is she took a color sheet film and had people and her mother lick them, touch them, step on them, and then she processed them, blew them up. In some cases, you'll see fingerprints. So these are very large pieces. And her award was very controversial, but I thought, that's really great. I mean, you can't have a more perfect portrait if you want to think about it. And again, that intersection between art and science is one of the great beauties, I think, of photography. Pacific Rim again, Out of the Shadows, contemporary Chinese photography. And so we had, and I made sure I wrote down the names of folks. So Hong Li are the images that you see up here. And so out of the shadows, we had a guest curator, Tiffany Wang Barres, and she was brilliant, is brilliant, and is local, but she has spent a great deal of time living in, she spent 10 years living in China, and she was able, so this is how another way you build a collection. She would call me up and say, you know, this artist is visiting me. Do you have time to look at their work? So yes, and this happened 4 times. And every single time I looked at the work and I said, I thought I knew Chinese contemporary photography. This is amazing. Why do I not know these people? And it's because what you see in places like the photo fairs or APAD or Paris Photo are the hot contemporary, they're doing Photoshop, they're doing all of that stuff. Well, these were a little bit older generation. And they were doing works that were unbelievable, things I had not seen before, which in my position is always exciting and refreshing. And so it's like, well, let's do an exhibition. And so she began the process and we worked together. And we also, which we'll talk more about, we began to plan a trip to China, to take our collectors there and begin to learn more about the works. And with Hong Li, that work was donated to us. Here you're seeing the work of, these are large pinhole images, large scale, and that's Shi Guru. And this is Wang Ningdi. Now this is really amazing. We went to his studio, and if you look at this work, it has to be specially lit. And they are landscapes. And the close-up is, each one of these is a color transparency that's maybe, an inch and a half long and attached. So when you turn off the light, you see one thing. When you turn the light on, the color is projected. And you end up seeing, in the case of the long image, you'll see like a dense brush forest. In this case, it's water. Everyone in the exhibition was selected because they have a new contemporary interpretation of traditional natural themes in China. So landscape, calligraphy, plants, all of this was very important. But also contemporary. And this was a very large monitor of video photography where things would slightly change and move, and really quite wonderful. And I'm going to go back. And then also the same artist included a virtual reality piece called 9 Dragons, which is now in the collection. So we have the headsets and you can see and ride a dragon. And as it goes through this mythological journey to basically the creation and destruction of the world. Other original exhibitions that we have worked on are Aaron Siskin, Mid-Century Modern. We have quite a few Aaron Siskins in the collection, and we had a guest curator, Mary Foresta, who worked on this exhibition. This was all vintage works by Aaron Siskin, and we did do a publication. So again, and there's Aaron with a video that you could watch of him talking about his process. Another series that we've done is called The Artist Speaks, because we have found that visitors like to hear the voice of the artist talking about their work. Obviously, this only works with living artists. And we have done 2 of them, and a 3rd one is coming next year, which I'll talk about. But Erica Demon, The Artist Speaks. And Erica is Jamaican-British and was very interested in the silhouette images that you see, and also the Brown series. And the Brown series is all of men, portraits of black men. The brown in the background she felt was the closest to her skin color. And what was amazing to me in looking at this kind of work is that the tones, the skin colors are all different. I mean, truly, we use terms like people of color or black, or well, what does that really mean? And the fact that she takes away the clothes so that you have no status, identifiers, anything. And if you would look really closely at their eyeball, you would see a reflection of her in their eye. So, and by the artist speaks, so this monitor that you see here with Spanish translation and English translation for hard of hearing, ASL, and it would be the artist talking about work in the exhibition. We also pulled from our collection and created a case which had early 19th century images. This is a tintype of black man. Also silhouettes, so that you could, what does the early photographs tell us? But the tradition of silhouettes and what she was doing with her silhouettes. So again, bringing that history with contemporary, I think, is a very compelling approach. The most recent Artist Speaks was Jed Fielding. The artist gifted the entire, and his major supporter gifted the entire exhibition to the museum. And and then a more recent gift, the book had, I think we had 60-some images in the exhibition, and then the book had 90, and then they donated the rest that were in the book. So we have a good representation of basically 40 years of Jed's portraits, street portraits. And they're more than street portraits. They are theater of the street. He uses a 24 or 28 millimeter lens, which means you're really close. They know they're being photographed. And the majority of his, and he was a student of Aaron Siskin, by the way. So the portrait that you saw of Aaron with the two flags, Jed took that picture. And so, and Jed also donated 21 Aaron Siskins, vintage Aaron Siskins, to the collection. And we also had monitors. I loved being able to hold the artist like that. So what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about upcoming. And next year, we have several exhibitions, well, the year is scheduled. We have a prize called the Lou Stuman Prize in Photography. And Lou Stuman was an award-winning filmmaker and photographer, originally out of New York, but spent most of his life in Los Angeles. And we became the beneficiaries of his estate, which was well planned out. And part of that was we acquired everything, including the copyright to his work and his films. And it also provided a stipend, well, an endowment of which, when the interest is at a certain rate, we provide an award. And so it is, there have been 7 awardees. Cara Romero is the 7th, but people like Debbie Fleming Caffery and Fazl Sheikh and James Nakwe. So, again, there's quite an impressive list of photographers, and elements, a certain number of works come to the collection as part of that cash award. So we're providing an exhibition next year to Cara Romero. She is Native American, and she lives in Santa Fe, but she is originally from California. And she is going to be part of that Artist Speaks exhibition, which we are working on right now. But I just wanted to let you know. And she's going to be focusing on indigenous landscape, women, and what was the third? I can't remember what the third section was, and helping with the grant today, and you'd think I'd remember. But as part of the opening, there will be video, part of the exhibition, there will be video and there will be audio. And for the opening, there's going to be a birdsong performance, which is basically how they sing and share history and tradition. So it's, I think, going to be quite special. So Lou Stuman, we have the archive. We also have another archive, the Nagasaki Journey Archive, and this is a very different archive, very important one, but One day after the bombing of Nagasaki, a Japanese soldier who was a photographer walked from one end of Nagasaki to the other photographing. And here you see a little bit of the damage, the tremendous devastation. Nagasaki was a very different bombing. Hiroshima was flat, so the effects went out. Nagasaki was more hilly, but still incredible devastation. He was so overwhelmed that he hid the film for quite a while, and also he was very afraid. Well, he was afraid of the Japanese military, but he was more afraid of the American military. But eventually that film came to light, and as part of the 50th anniversary, a filmmaker in the Bay Area contacted the Friends of Photography and MOPA about doing a joint big multiple location exhibition with film. It was in Japan, and so but we are the repository now of all of that material, including film interviews that weren't necessarily part of the final films, and so it's quite an important collection. Devastating, but important. And I mentioned the Peter Farrell collection of Australian photography with important names like Max Dupain, and I have had Australian curators lust after this solarized image that you see here because it's a unique print, but we have it. And his son Rex Dupain was also the swimmers was also a photographer. Bill Henson, and it really, as you can see, that original gift was really quite substantial. Currently, it's with curatorial assistants, both the collection and the Australian contemporary work, and it's going to open at Princeton, and I believe they're trying to find an Australia venue as well. So I know there's a lot that I'm talking about, but I will not be talking about our youth exhibition because I know that when we had an all-staff meeting that Chantel did a great presentation, and you can actually go and see our 17th annual youth exhibition. So I wanted to kind of not do that, but those are incredibly important and engaging, and they're the next generation of photographers and hopefully collectors, and supporters of the museum. But there have been a series of education-based exhibitions where I look at photography from the prehistory, history, art, science, and technology, and contemporary work. So the first one was Seeing is Believing, and it included, and everything is presented kind of in smaller groupings so that you can learn something from each one. And it really was about the photography, which showed that the portrait painting, that kind of head and shoulders, and then the silhouette, kind of head and shoulders, and then miniature paintings, all of which we have in the collection now. And then we had daguerreotype, so that the presentation of that daguerreotype, the first permanent photographic image, was, and you'll see some later on, mimicked the same style. What was gone before, the oval kind of frame, the head and shoulders, was all very deliberate. It was, following the tradition. And that exhibition also included 3D, so both anaglyphic and lenticular, and a contemporary artist who you would have to put the anaglyphic, the red and blue filtered to see that image in 3D. And wonderful skulls. The human skull we borrowed from the Museum of Us. The ape skull is actually back in the collection, and but this went with the mugshot book. So the mugshot comes out of phrenology, and we have engravings that show the different hierarchy, pre-photographic engravings in the collection that show the Roman Greek ideal, the African and the ape. And that was a justification for slavery, that they could bring them, to Christianity, and that was the justification because, again, there was this assumed hierarchy of intelligence. And then phrenology, which is the reading of the bumps on a head, a pseudoscience, but considered scientific at the time, also supported that idea of criminal types, artistic types, all of that. And so we have books on phrenology. We have pre-photographic. And then stereo early viewing devices for photography, as well as an anaglyphic contemporary piece. Hidden worlds was another one, things you couldn't see with the normal eye. And it included these incredible blow-ups of these more than microscopic. I mean, these large images were taken with these thin scans and then put together, so the detail is incredible. So we own those, but on the monitor, on the touch table, you could call each one of these up and blow them up and see them in a variety of ways. I talked about the integration of artists' work. The snowflakes that you see is a project by Mike and Doug Starn, and off to the left of those, on top is a pre-photographic engraving of what people thought snowflakes look like, and then we actually have a Benson snowflake. He was the Vermont farmer who began to photograph snowflakes and made thousands and thousands. There's a lot of obsession in photography, and I really like that. So, but anyway, you can see that this whole idea carries over, and there's this interconnection, which I think is really important and helps people understand photography in a different way. Hidden worlds, photography in the great beyond. So photography was used in spiritualism to capture spirits. There is this charcoal sketch, which has all the symbolisms of death and dying, and it's a river, and they're waiting out the boat to go away. But what we do have in the collection are the two photographs underneath. I don't have close-ups of them, but one is a cabinet card, which is maybe, 3 by 4 by 5, 3 by 5, and it's a woman, and she's got all these spirits floating around her, including Queen Victoria, an Indian chief, Abraham Lincoln, and because photography could do this, And there was a photographer, Mumler, and he was taken to court. He did all of these spirit photographs where they were carte de visites, a smaller size, and we have the actual page from the London Illustrated, I think it is, of spirit photograph reproductions. And talks about his court case. He was found not guilty of making this up. Go figure. And then also a book by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who, the author of Sherlock Holmes, was a spiritualist. So spiritualism came about. It kind of flowed. It came about in this country, and it was the Fox sisters in upstate New York that were doing readings and heard knockings, but it became embraced in Europe, and especially following things like the Civil War and then World War I, people wanted to connect with their dearly departed. So the other photograph we have is a later one, probably 1920s, and it's of a medium, and it looks like fabric being vomited, but it's ectoplasm. It's God love photography, and then things that will tell you about it, and then early microscopes. So again, you can see the kind of tools that provided the ideas. We had a photograph. We have a 19th century photograph of a flea, an albumin print. So these kinds of items that are important. Illusion and the Magic of Motion was yet another one. And I'm delving into these because this is where you can see the kinds of things. Not everything is from the collection, but the early eyeglasses, the book that shows eye illustrations, pre-photographic engravings of the eye. And it also, we had the early shadow puppets, and because those were about movement. And the thaumatrope was created so that you could spin, and it was an optical illusion. This is a piece by Luis Gonzalo Palma, and there is an accent in there, but I couldn't figure out how to put the accent on his name. Yeah, and on PowerPoint, so forgive me. But we acquired this specifically for the exhibition, and this is a contemporary example of anamorphic art. And what you have with anamorphic art, which was pre-photographic, and it was either a mirror cylinder or a mirror cone. There were different versions. And you would, if you're looking down at the image, you can't quite tell what it is. It's kind of odd and spread out. But if you look at its reflection in the mirror, you can see there's a face down there in that little corner. And so there's a famous painting of, I think it's Henry VIII, standing there, and there's a table and a skull that's kind of stretched out. That's anamorphic. And you can look at that with a device or a certain angle, and it becomes normal. And then we created a zoetrope so that people could do it, and then it included this work of a phenakistoscope by contemporary artists and special strobe going off. And he used photographs, and the pieces we picked, and this one was quite large, it's 4 feet across. And this one was all photographs from Edward Muybridge, who was the photographer who did Stop Action, of which we included in the exhibition. But the woman in the center of that was Muybridge's wife. And Edward Muybridge had several different spellings of his name. He was originally from England. He came to this country, photographed the American West, was well known, and then he shot his wife's lover and disavowed his son, said it wasn't his, and ended up in court. And then he ran away to Central America and Mexico. And then he came back and eventually started working for Leland Stanford, governor of California, who wanted to catch a horse in motion. And so that's who that photographer is. And we do have quite a number of his works. So how do you put a collection together, continue to put a collection together? Well, a really good way, collector trips. And we would take our collectors on trips to, we have been to England, Amsterdam, Paris photo several times. This selection is one of our trips to England. We're meeting with, in Devonshire, with the artist Gary Fabian Miller, and then below that with the collector, he is one of the producers of the James Bond, Michael Wilson. And he's got one of the major collections both in London and in his home in Los Angeles. We this is from Paris, where we visited a number of people. The woman who is looking off down here is Susan Durgis, who does these wonderful cameraless images where she puts the photo paper in the water and captures by moonlight an image, a photogram done by the moon. And then here's one of our major collectors, Larry Friedman with Todd Heido, but in Paris. And here we are in Europe, and we are actually having a wine tasting. Food is a big part of it. David Mizell, we ran into there, so we collect his work, and he's based in San Francisco. A trip to Berlin and Prague, and here we are meeting with the Czech artist Pavlo Blanca. Let's see. And in China, and we're with Hong Li, who cooked a meal for us, and below that is James Jim Loughton, who we have a number of works in the collection, and we're having a meal with Christopher Bucklow, who you see here, and this is Christopher's work. So the reason I'm showing you this is our collectors like meeting the artists. They like building their collection from the artists that they meet. And it's important because I felt while the museum does not have a large acquisitions budget, one of the things that I can do is encourage collectors, because I can either borrow or get them to give eventually to the museum. And unfortunately, that came to being when Larry Friedman, a trustee and former president of the board, went on all of our trips, passed away unexpectedly. And he had gifted his collection to the museum. And so this is 38 works, almost all contemporary. He was a fearless collector. And I can tell you a story about every single image, where he collected it, how he collected it. But you can see that that his work, that he, from Ruud van Empel to Hendrik Kirsten, Todd Heido, he really liked Todd's work, John Chiara, David Mizell. I mean, again, these names you've been hearing from me. And we now hold all of this. So that was going to be something else. Oh, the other thing that we have done is move towards working at getting large donations. And this kind of planned giving is a better way of collecting for us than if we try to buy a picture at a time. And we did an exhibition not that long ago that looked at 10 decades of our collection. And the idea behind it was to work from the 1920s up and to present artists where we had a substantial holding and show groups of their work, because a different kind of story can be told. We have a surprising number of Rodchenkos and early Russian photographer. We have a very large collection of Bravo. And so all of these are from that exhibition. Arnold Newman. That's Noguchi, the portrait of the sculptor Noguchi. We have a collection of Ruth Bernhard that covers the 50s through the 70s. Danny Lyons, Larry Clark, Graciela Itabide, Max Yavno, Robert Flick, the Park Harrisons, Gary Schneider. So this is actually interesting. This is a very large piece, and this was from a series where he had the subject lie down on the ground in a dark room, and the camera was posed above them. And so this is, so you can't, it's not the usual portrait where there's an interaction between the subject and the photographer. It is really about long exposure and this kind of, in a way I like to reference Julia Margaret Cameron, this kind of when you have a long exposure and and you're trying to hold that pose. But we have a few of the Gary Schneiders because he was a Lou Stuman Award winner. And then we have a collection of Troy Anderson's work, a large collection of Brett Weston. We have about 110. We had 60. And then the archive, Brett Weston Archive contacted us, said we'd like to make a donation. We gave them the list, and then they provided 50 images that we didn't have. And Michael Light. Upcoming, at the same time that we have the Cara Romero exhibition, we're doing Storyteller, works by Holly Roberts. That will include, we have a number of Holly Roberts' work in the collection, but she's gifting all the works, the 60 images that will be in that exhibition, to the collection. And Holly is a photographer that I've always enjoyed her work. I mean, from the 80s forward, she was breaking new ground. She was approaching photography in a way that was very different. These two pieces are a little bit more recent in that she paints and then cuts the photography cuts the photograph and collages it. This is earlier, where she is heavily painting on the surface of the photograph. She and her husband spent 8 years living on the Zuni reservation. He was a medical doctor and was paying off his loans by working for the Indian Health Service. And so the landscape, the color, a lot of the symbolism is reflected from that time. But she's from Colorado and has lived in the Southwest. So another exhibition that is underway for next year are going to be recent acquisitions, and from both collections, because this really is about merging the collections. And one recent gift that we acquired is the work of Bill Armstrong. Bill Armstrong, we were just gifted 11 of his series, and this work is part of his approach, where this out of focus, and these are 20, bigger than 20 by 24. They're good size, 30 by 40 maybe. And they are something that he was doing after the death of his father. He felt that these were really kind of mysterious and dark, and but his whole style is this kind of color abstraction that you see here. Along with that is another recent acquisition, which is the Westrom collection. And this is 900 and, I had to make sure I have the number here because I can't remember everything. 986 cases, 19th century cases, and of that, 429 of them have fabulous images in them. So the collector was interested in the cases. And the earliest images, daguerreotypes and then even tintypes and ambrotypes, in Europe they tended to use, you find framed ones, but she was most interested in, and here this is a very unusual one, you can see the multiple images, but these kind of early use of thermoplastic or union cases were pressed. And so you could see that the designs could become very detailed, intricate, and so very, very collectible. And there are collectors that just wanted the cases. But I said, okay, we don't have a lot of this. What a great story, part of the history. But look what's inside these. And so here's another one with a family. Obviously, the parents and children. But you can also see, and those are ambrotypes, images on glass. There's also these Oreo cases or curved cases that will either hinge on the bigger ones or screw open, and there'll be an image inside. Or something like this, which is a very large 8 by 10 inch size. And my all-time favorite, this very large daguerreotype. And the daguerreotype, the first permanent photographic process, was an image on a copper plate with a very polished silver coating. I'm almost done, folks, so hold on. It was sensitized. That plate went in the back of the camera. The exposure was made. It was processed using fuming mercury and iodine, and you ended up with a single positive image. And this is how the cases were presented. So below it, you can see a more traditional size. And again, this kind of quirky stuff that, this trick where they would have this plate in the camera. This is an ambrotype on glass. And then they would most likely pull the plate part way, put the plate down, switch, turn the plate in the back, and then pull the plate again. That's how I'm thinking they did it. One of our travelers and major collectors also donated the money for our large print storage, which you can peek at back there, John Dolstadt, and also talks. Jerry Berndt, who you see his work, and he's one of the 3 people on the stage. We visited in Paris. Our collectors bought his work. And unfortunately, Jerry has since passed. He's American. He was photographing in Boston, but was living in France. Again, only Hint, this is the tip of the iceberg of what's in the collection. It could be days of telling you, and I don't want to make anybody sit for days, but there are beautiful things, such as this hand-painted album page, carte de visite, and everything else around it is hand-decorated, and it would have been part of a Victorian album. So that's really all I have. I'm happy to take any questions. Oh, I did forget one very important part of what the collection is going to be, a collection exhibition, which is the Jerry and Mary Kay Gardner recent gift. As you know, unfortunately, Jerry passed away, but he donated his book collection, photo book collection, and his Eastern European and Russian photography collection. We did do an exhibition a number of years ago, which was Collective Restraint, 4 decades of Czech photography from that collection. But now we have the entire collection, so that will be included as well. So again, people, a lot going on. It's great.